Hello and welcome to this episode of Inside the Piranha Club with me, Rebecca Clancy.
And me, Ben Hunt.
And me, Mark Van Bryan.
And we will be taking a look ahead to this weekend's Japanese Grand Prix. But just before we started recording, Ben has an update for us and has decided that he now knows what he would like to do with his ashes. And we stopped him from talking because we thought we'd save it for the pod. So Ben, what are you going to do with your ashes?
Well, we obviously need to put this into context.
About.
In our last podcast, which if you didn't listen to it, Rebecca went to a funeral last weekend, and the deceased went up in a rocket, in a firework, and it went bang, and everyone ingested said person, and we all found that a bit morbid, but a bit funny as well.
The first 70% of that story was true.
What, the ingesting bit is? I'm convinced you have.
I mean, Ben, not everyone does fireworks like you do in said last podcast where you ended up firing podcasts at your own and your friends' children. These were done...
Firing podcasts?
Fireworks.
Firing rockets.
Firing rockets. This was done by a professional company. They were miles away from us. So no ashes were consumed. Anyway, you weren't convinced by this idea, were you? And we've been making you think long and hard, apparently.
Yeah. So I don't want to be buried because I wouldn't really want to go in the ground with all the worms and stuff. So I think that would be a bad thing for me. I'm not really into that. So yes, cremated. And I thought it'd be really nice if all my ashes were put into like little glass bottles that could go on people's key rings. So like I could still hang out with people. You know, I could still, like car key rings, I can go on car journeys and stuff. If my kids go travelling, they've got a little key ring of me, a part of me they can take. It was either that or I'm turned into something. And I was discussing this with my wife, and I was thinking about something for the garden, like a porcelain toadstool or something. A gnome.
A really grumpy gnome.
Yes, exactly. A happy grumpy gnome. But no, I thought I could be onto something with the keyring.
No,
like
it's like a weird way of haunting people.
If someone,
is it even legal?
No, I could still do the haunting.
Can I say no?
That's the old school fun.
Yeah, I don't want one.
Like
I'm out.
Well, look, everyone comes to the party. We can have fireworks. I'm not going up in the firework, but you will get a little bottle of me to take home, and you can do what you want with it. You can feed it to the fish, you can chuck it in a bin, or you could take me on your little car journeys to the supermarket. Whatever you want to do with me. You can sniff me, you can do whatever you want. I don't know.
Or the other question we had for you last time was, which racetrack do you want to be scattered on? So we could just take your ashes. Hopefully they'll get through airport security and the track security. What track are you going for?
Well, I said Mokpo, didn't I?
Yeah, but
South Korea.
No.
That was my one. I mean, look.
The winner's trophy could have you in it.
Or we could put you in the champagne when they spray it.
Oh.
Yeah, there you go.
Now you're
and
on
then
board.
you would be ingested. This is.
We just need to talk to. We need to get once we've got LVMH on board, we'll be able to absolutely sort of.
Moe and Shan Ben.
Oh, dearie me.
Right, this is
here we
descended, and this might be one of our better digressions.
Hang on, right? But by the way, if anyone wants a bottle of my ashes, please drop us a line, and when I go, we can send them to you, or you guys can send them on. And then you can decide what you want to do with it. I mean, it's entirely up to you. I won't be offended. I'll be dead. So do what you like.
Yeah, I'm still going to say no. Shall we actually move on to why we're here? I don't even know where to start with this. Right, Japanese Grand Prix this weekend. An absolute firm favourite on the calendar. Suzuka, okay, not for the place itself. It's quite a... in my mind, I always think of it as being really grey and rainy whenever I'm there. But an absolutely wonderful track. The only figure of 8 on the calendar. Absolutely brilliant. I remember the first time I ever ran the track, going through the S's, I made little race car noises because I thought I was cool. But then the thing I loved the most about it was that you finish, and I'm talking on the Thursday night about 5-6 hours after everyone else has gone home. The grandstand on the straight finish line is absolutely packed full of fans, still watching reruns of old races. And as any runner comes through, and I was lucky enough to experience this, you cross the line and you get a massive cheer. So I absolutely adore this track. But I want to start because, as I mentioned, Thursdays, it's media day. And there is one story which has absolutely dominated today in Japan, and that is the rejection by Max Verstappen of a journalist from his media session. So I'm just going to tee up exactly what happened, and I'll tell you it was Giles Richards, who works for The Guardian, and from the outset, I will be completely honest and say that the three of us, we all know Gilo well. We've all worked with him for a very long time, worked alongside him. Ben and I both worked on Fleet Street. MMB worked for PA, which is by extension working for Fleet Street. So we know Gilo well. So I'm just going to put that out there. And last year in Abu Dhabi at the season finale, where Max Verstappen finished 2 points off Lando Norris for the title, Gilo, as we call him, Gilo asked Max Verstappen in the post-race press conference if it had anything to do with Barcelona, which is the race in Spain where Max Verstappen was deemed by the FIA, I should say, to have deliberately driven into George Russell. It got him a penalty, it got him demoted, it cost him 9 points. Gilo's question, which in my opinion was fair in Abu Dhabi, was did he regret what happened in Barcelona? Now, I was in the room in Abu Dhabi when this question was asked, and it was very tense. Gilo quite uncomfortably laughed, and it wasn't a grin, as Verstappen claimed it was. It was just one of those really uncomfortable moments. Then we fast forward to now, sort of 4 months later in Japan, and Gilo was in Red Bull today for Max Verstappen's media duties. It's very normal. We all go to them. It's what happens. And Max Verstappen, before he answered a question, before he would even take a question, and I'm going to read you out the script because I think this is really important for clarity. Max Verstappen said, 1 second, I'm not speaking before he's leaving, pointing at Gilo. Gilo replies, seriously? Verstappen, yeah. Gilo, because of the question last year, the one I've just mentioned. Gilo, yeah, you want me to leave? Verstappen, yeah. Because of the question I asked you in Abu Dhabi? Verstappen, yeah. Gilo, about why you, and then Verstappen interrupts and says, yeah. Gilo keeps going, about Spain. Verstappen curtly replies, get out. And Gilo says, you really, really upset about it? And Verstappen replies, get out, get out. So Gilo leaves and Verstappen turns around and says, now we can start. Okay, I'm going to come to you first, Ben. You've been speaking to a lot of the journalists that are there on the ground. I just want to, for the purposes of the fact that we make a point that the three of us are all journalists, we are bringing you this podcast from the point of view where we actually are, we know the players at hand, we've been to the races, we know the paddock very well. For me personally, this is a very bad image for Max Verstappen. It is a very bad image for Red Bull. And I would go as far as to say, not only is it petulant from Max Verstappen, who earns nearly $100 million a year, it is actually just rude.
Yeah, look, there's a number of elements here, isn't there? Like, I think that Giles has handled it quite well. That exchange. I think that he could have flipped his lid and spoke out and lashed out. It's Max's prerogative, first of all, whether he wants to do a press conference or not. I think the first thing that we need to make clear is this is a team press conference, not an FIA one. So the difference is that when it's an FIA press conference, you have to turn up as a driver or team principal. You are requested, and that's the one that people always see on the stage on that cringy sofa. That's a stipulated. You have to go and do that. If you don't, then you risk a fine or community service or whatnot for missing it. So first off, it's a Red Bull event. So if he wants to do it, that's fine. If he doesn't want to do it, that's also fine. But protocol here is normally that they do it. I did find it a little bit strange, the reaction. I found the question awkward back in Abu Dhabi, like a really strange question to ask at the time, but again, it's a journalist's responsibility to ask, and if that was the question that Giles wanted to know, then he's within his rights to ask that question. But you also need to remember the way that Max answered it, and he said something about a grin. He felt, I think, that Giles was smirking and taking delight in the fact that he hadn't won the title, and perhaps the element was because it was a clash with George that he felt that there was some sort of British bias. And so I think that's probably the precursor to all of this, and the fact that Max now has Giles nailed as someone that doesn't like him is obviously British, so would favour a British driver. So I think that's important. That's an important point to make. I think the other element, and this is what I'm seeing on social media, is the big pile on journalists generally. Like, there is an opinion now that all journalists are evil and that we're all trying to meddle and trying to cause mischief. Maybe Giles was trying to cause mischief in that initial question, but it's probably fair to assume that he wouldn't have done so in Suzuka this weekend. So a really strange mix of elements to come into it. I think for me, the most disappointing thing is that Verstappen has done this, because I have him down as a big man, a big character, a big voice, and I've written many a time in support of his actions when he's come out and taken a stance against things like the FIA, and spoke his mind. Like when he was talking about the new regulations, I like the fact that he is big enough to have that voice. But then why move to silence the media or, get uppity over someone being in that press conference? So, that's disappointing. I also think it's disappointing the way that all played out, in the sense that no other journalist stood up for Giles, and I think that is something that's very different about the media these days. Everyone's very afraid and too scared to ask awkward questions. I know I've been on the receiving end of it, and MMB, we're going to come on to a funny anecdote at some point where we, both got dug out in another sport. But I am disappointed that no one else stood up and said, hang on a minute, you can't really just throw someone out just because you want to. Like, he hasn't done anything wrong here. So, pretty disappointed with the way that the media have handled it, if I'm being really honest. I know Giles hasn't written a story as we're recording. I know he intends to write a story on it. I have checked in with him to make sure that he's okay, because, as I say, I know what it's like, and you can get loads of heat and loads of trolls, and he appreciated me reaching out. His word was water off a duck's back. He's got thick skin. He's going to, ride it out as he will. But I'm very disappointed where the media have done it. There's very little support. I think, sorry, I am waffling here. This was almost my 1 minute rant, but also the way that it's been presented by UK media has been really poor. Yeah. Digging out photos of him and using his own social media, and I it's just pretty disrespectful all round. Disrespectful from Max, disrespectful from Giles, disrespectful from the media, and it's just a bit of a mess, isn't it? And I think that's the sad part of it.
Yeah, I agree with you about the Abu Dhabi. I think the question could have been phrased differently. I don't think he was, we've known him a long time, I don't think he was grinning in satisfaction. I think it was just knowing of that awkward moment, which, Ben, you know about, because you had your awkward moment filmed on Drive to Survive with Toto Wolff, where you asked him a question, and then it's that nervous smile that you can't help, and then Toto, who you know really well, he replied to you and said, oh, you're just looking for a headline. What are you smiling about? And then it was the lunch that we had at the start of the year. They had seen Drive to Survive. The series hadn't come out yet. And Toto joked with you and said, oh, Ben, I think you could be in for a bit of grief here.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, he said it. Have you seen it? Have you seen it? And I was like, no. I was, we have a fun exchange, and I was like, okay, fine. Didn't really think too much of it. And then obviously when it did come out, and Drive to Survive was super popular then, and I remember getting loads of heat on Twitter for the company that I work for, the way I asked the question. It was obviously edited in a different way. It was cut. It was no context. There was nothing about my relationship with him and how we talk. So, yeah, it was quite an awkward situation. That's why I reached out to Giles as well, because just conscious, on the other side of the world, he could be getting loads of heat. I'm sure he is in his inbox at the moment from people, digging on him. So it's important that you realise that there are people around. It can be a dark moment for journalists. And as I say, it's not helped by this misconception in this day and age where journalists are just slammed repeatedly. We're all tarred with the same brush, no matter what outlet you work for. This is another thing. Again, people saying, "Oh, the difference between tabloid and broadsheet," it doesn't matter. Everyone's trying to do their job. Yes, there's a different style, there's a different audience, but it doesn't make you holier than thou just because you're working for a different title. Do you know what I mean? It's. I find that a little bit distasteful as well. Sorry, I've gone on a really bad
Well,
rant.
it's a topic that actually means a lot to us. And MMB, just final one for Ben, just before I bring MMB in. You talked about the British bias there, Ben, and I think you and I were both there in 2021. For me, the attack on the British media who work in F1 has got significantly worse since 2021 with that battle between Max Verstappen and Lewis Hamilton. For the record, we all work for British publications. I am personally not actually British, despite how I sound. I'm not. I'm Irish. I'm very proud to be Irish. So there's no British bias on my part. But it is absolutely horrendous, the amount of attacks that we as journalists come under. I personally came off Twitter, X, whatever you want to call it, because you can imagine the abuse that we all get. And as a woman, you can imagine many of the references that I got. And it's absolutely unacceptable. And we would see it, wouldn't we, when the drivers would crash into each other and one of them would get abuse and a statement would come out saying, we abhor any abuse directed at anybody. But me personally, I never felt that support within the media centre. And I don't think it's okay. And I've been called in by Ferrari, actually. I'll tell this story. I got called in by Ferrari because they deemed that I was writing negatively. And actually, what was put to me was that I was asking questions that were too difficult. And this is in the time of Sebastian Vettel, of who I had a couple of run-ins with. I would just like to say they were all professional. It was never personal. But they wanted to know why my questions were so difficult. And it's because I am not an extension of the PR machine. And I think for me, one of the problems in that media centre is that there are too many fans in it and there are not enough journalists.
Yeah.
Our job is to not make everybody happy. When there are difficult questions that need to be asked, it is our job to ask them. And you can like that or you can not like that. But if we aren't holding people to account, then people can get away with whatever they want. So it's important that journalists are allowed to do their job, that we are not silenced, and that we can keep holding people to account. Because, okay, on this occasion, it's a bit of a, upset for Verstappen. But what happens when it's a breach of cost cap, or when it's something more sinister, or there are financial irregularities, or, Crashgate, Spygate, all of these things that happen? It is so important that we stand up and make sure that people are accountable. Right, Ben, that wasn't really a question to you in the end. That ended up being me ranting. MB, I want to come to you because you also have an opinion on this. We've obviously been messaging endlessly between ourselves, between our other F1 friends. There's been a terrible reaction online, but I want to hear this anecdote that you two messaged about, and I have absolutely no idea what you're talking about, so you can tell me all about it.
I'll come on to that. I wanted my main gripe with the whole situation, if you like, and you touched on it there, is this perceived change of roles of journalists, not just in F1, I think it's sport in general, but given that we're talking obviously on a Formula 1 podcast, I'll keep it to that. Look, Gilo, any reporter has the right to ask any question, especially sporting question. It wasn't about his family, his children, his private life. This was just a sporting question, a legitimate question that Max didn't like at the time. Other reporters might not have agreed with it, but he's absolutely in this right space to be able to ask those questions. Also, just quickly as a little tangent, would Max be so shirty if he'd won those first two races? Probably not, but I digress. It also leads, like I said, to this perceived role of the modern journalist, if you like, the idea that difficult questions shouldn't be asked, and I've seen lots of comments on social media posts basically calling Giles out for even asking that question. They shouldn't risk upsetting a driver. But look, the Guardian, who Giles works for, they've paid to send him to Japan. They paid to send him and be in Abu Dhabi to cover the crowning of Lando Norris as world champion. Not to just smile and nod, like you said, Rebecca, but to try and get a good story. I spoke on the Q&A the other day about celebrities and that dynamic with F1. They have a place in the sport. So do, if you like, the influencers that we see in the paddock now. I don't have a problem with them. We shouldn't be complaining that these guys are in the paddock and in and around the drivers, because they serve a role in F1 that is vital these days. But their role is completely different to that of a sports journalist on the ground, to get the best story, to get the best quotes, to get the best reactions. Regardless of who that rubs up the wrong way, this just happens to have rubbed Max up the wrong way. But that's the issue for me. I think it's this whole oh, you know, why should you be asking these questions? You're just there to do X, Y, and Z. And it's no. These reporters are on the ground to get stories. And Max could have given a great answer in Abu Dhabi. Who knows? I don't think he did in the end, did he? Because he didn't appreciate the question. But if you don't ask, you don't get. And that is the thing I think that's the social media reaction to this doesn't understand. It's the whole typical journalist asking a question. It's like, yes, because that is the role of a journalist. And that brings me to my anecdote. Ben and I have known each other many years. And this was from a football match in January 2013. So, you know, Ben had less salt and pepper beard and I was more bald than I am now. But essentially what happened was it was Mauricio Pochettino's first game in charge of Southampton. They drew 0-0 with Everton on, I think it was a Monday night.
It was, yeah.
Yeah, Ben and I were the two nominated media representatives to go down and try and talk to the players. We spoke to a couple of guys from Southampton, got their views. Everton obviously were a long way from home from Monday night, but we sided up to their own media team and we said, look, they were about to interview their captain at the time, Phil Neville, and we said, oh, would we be able to just grab a couple of questions at the end? And they said, probably not, because we're in a bit of a rush. Anyway, they ended up only doing maybe a minute or two. So we stepped forward and said, oh, Phil, could we just grab a word? And a tirade of abuse, would you call it, Ben? I mean, I don't know if we have a beat machine on this podcast, so we won't be able to repeat some of the words. But yeah, we were called almost every name under the sun, which no pun on who Ben was working for at the time. But yeah, fair to say that we were on the receiving end then. And funnily enough, Molly Hudson, who now covers Formula 1 for the Times, she also was on the receiving end of a Phil Neville tirade many moons ago. So maybe he's got form. But it is one of those things journalists have to roll with the punches. But the reaction now, compared to what we would have seen in 2013, if that had been a thing, Ben, that came out, is completely different. Because as I've looped back to my previous point, it's driven by this social media world of we should be almost grateful that we're in the paddock. So why should we feel upset? Why should we upset anyone? We should just be seen and not heard. But we're there to tell these stories. We're there to ask difficult questions. Sometimes those answers are the way into stories. And no doubt, let's be honest, if Max had given a great answer to Giles in Abu Dhabi and said, do you know what? Yes, I regret what happened with George Russell in Barcelona. That's cost me the World Championship. Every outlet, every social media, every influencer would have been using that quote to get clicks and views on their website or platform. So, you know, you've got to take the rough with the smooth, and you've also got to ask the difficult questions. I stand with Gilo.
And also it should be said that Verstappen has actually spoken about Barcelona and said it was a mistake, it was a disaster, and by other people who put a question to him slightly differently, he did answer it. Okay, let's move on. I think it's fair to say we all stand with Gilo on this one. And also, just quickly, Ben, to your point, what people don't get to see is our relationships with these people. So, you know, I've asked tough questions of Lewis Hamilton, for example. I see him in the paddock and you still say hello. You know, it's fine. They have a bad weekend. They're not your best friend. And the second you think a driver is your friend, you're not doing your job properly, and you're definitely not a journalist anymore. So, you know, you swing with the punches, and it is what it is. Right, let's move on to actually talking about the race. Well, is it going...
Is there a race?
I know.
There's a race,
Well, I think now we've been talking for so long, we're probably on the review, are we? It's probably happened. The Mercedes 1-2 in the first two races. Can they do it again, Ben?
Yes, they can. I think that what we've learned from those first two races is that is a very strong package, quick out the box. Operationally, the team performing well. I think their biggest threat, though, is the two Ferraris. And I think that, you know, what we learned again from the first two is that Ferrari are making steps and, you know, improving each time. So I think that they could come under a little bit more heat, but I fully anticipate a Mercedes win at the weekend. But I do see the Ferrari duo charging their way to the podium. So, yeah, I'm optimistic for an exciting one.
A very happy Lewis Hamilton arriving in Suzuka this weekend. He's been in Tokyo with Kim Kardashian, or not with Kim Kardashian, or in the same vicinity as Kim Kardashian, and apparently 3 of her children. So the relationship is so serious. He's met the kids, so we're led to believe, and that is the last thing I will mention about Kim K. But Lewis Hamilton does love this track, doesn't he? He absolutely adores Suzuka. As I said, it's a firm favourite. Him in particular, he goes well here. That Ferrari is looking very strong. Last time out in China, he got his first proper podium. I'm not including sprint races here, but he got his first proper podium. He is absolutely on fire this year so far, isn't he?
Yeah, massive. He's great, isn't he? And he's won several times in Japan. I know some of those have
Five
come
times.
5 times indeed. I think some of those came in Fuji, didn't they? I don't think he's won 5 times at
Yes,
Suzuka. Am I
true.
right?
Yeah,
But
once in Fuji.
it's similar, I suppose, to that what we saw in China, isn't it? The fans absolutely love him. He loves being there. I'm sure if he gets on the podium, we'll hear a bit of his pidgin Japanese as he thanks the fans and everything for being there. But yeah, it's another one of those races he's going to go to, and people are hoping he can get that first win for Ferrari. I think I agree with Ben in terms of the Mercedes still look too strong, but if it wasn't for this Ferrari at the moment, these new rules would be very similar to every recent reset we've seen where one team's dominated, and that's led to fan drop off and boring races and stuff. So we need to be thankful, I think, for those two red cars at the moment for keeping things interesting, even if it is only for the first quarter or third of a race. They'll be there to pick up the pieces if there's reliability issues with those Mercedes, which at the moment look a bit bulletproof compared to the likes of McLaren and things like that. So yeah, it's a great weekend for Lewis. He would love it if he could follow up with another podium, and obviously he'd much prefer it if he could be on the top step spraying Ben's ashes into the face of his teammate.
Lewis is probably the one who'd agree to it as well. Lewis and Ben get on very well. Lovely little segue there. Thank you very much for McLaren, who are not having such a good time. Will Oscar Piastri, Ben, actually start this race?
It's quite funny. I saw a message or article or piece or tweet or whatever it was saying that he's been watching the first two, and like literally has been watching the first two. Yeah, look, I think he'll come into this race hoping to start it. Will he finish it? Who knows? But already so many points to make up in the championship. It's quite hard. We've already lost 2 races in Middle East. He's lost this one. 4 races in total now. That he won't score points in, so it's incredibly difficult to mount a title challenge starting so far back. So disappointing, and I'm sure he's out to make up for lost time. But I just think that it's a bit of a tough ask at the moment.
And what about Lando Norris, reigning world champion? He didn't start the last race either. His title fight looks like it's getting even harder. He's kind of a bit in no man's land, really, which is not where we want to see him.
It's really quite weird, isn't it? I mean, I think I'm really perplexed because I had come into this season having gone to the MTC earlier in the year, and I think I might have mentioned this, and I was struck by the confidence in the team and the swagger that they had. They were relaxed about the new rules, and for me that all fed into the narrative of being quite comfortable and assured with what they've got. And then obviously to start the season so badly, it's put them in a difficult hole. And again, they're playing catch up. I think it's they're 80 points behind Mercedes now in the championship, something like that. And again, it's a big thing to make up. So yeah, look, they're obviously hoping for better times. That's obvious.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you who else has had a bad start to the season, and I'm talking more about his on-track antics, is Max Verstappen. He has won the last 4 outings for...
No, get out. Get out.
I'm not answering that one.
Yeah, stop this podcast.
Oh, I'm seeing you later for a drink, MMB, so you can't tell me to get out. I know Ben was invited. He's just, actually, we should just say RNFI, shouldn't we? Right, anyway, Max Verstappen has won the last 4 outings in Japan, but it has not had a very good season. And I do agree with you. I think he's possibly a bit spikier than normal because he's not doing very well. And I would just like to say they are actually the words of Toto Wolff as well, who said the problem isn't the car, the problem isn't the regulations when referring to the fact that Max Verstappen can't stop comparing racing to Mario Karts. He said that Verstappen is living a horror show, as in that Red Bull is rubbish. MMB, what are we looking for this week?
They'll just want improvement, won't they? I think there's a lot of teams in the same, but you can kind of put them in that same McLaren boat. They've had issues with reliability. Obviously, that stems from the fact that we've got Red Bull powertrains there now, in association with Ford. They've built their own power unit for this season. There's going to be teething problems with that. Let's be honest, it's not the worst new power unit on the grid. I'm sure we'll come on to that as well. But for him and Hadjar, points would be great. I'm sure a podium would be even better. But again, it's at that stage of the season. We are only going into the 3rd round of a championship with these brand new regulations. And I think if they can have a strong showing, if they can qualify well and they can run to the end of the race, even if it's down in the lower end of the points, then look, Max Verstappen isn't going to be happy with that, but the team have to see it as progress at that point, don't they, for sure?
I look forward to Max Verstappen falling out with more people then.
Yes, exactly.
He has won in 2022, 23, 24, 25.
His win there last year was mega. The McLaren started the season really well. Everyone was basically saying, could this be similar to that Red Bull year of dominance? He went there. I remember it. This is a nice segue for you shortly, Ben. I remember it vividly because of that white Red Bull. And he just went out there and absolutely, if you like the pun, he maxed it, didn't he? And he absolutely wiped the floor with Lando and Oscar.
No, let's not start that. Thank you very much. My most memorable...
But if he maxes it this weekend, he is only going to get...
out.
Fourth or fifth is the best he can hope for, even with his talent, I think.
I think he qualifies fifth, finishes fourth. That's my prediction.
Yeah, he's I mean, for all the grumpiness, he is an incredible racer, possibly. In fact, I think absolutely the best driver of his generation. I was just going to say, my memory of Max Verstappen winning in Japan was, I think, 22, the year that no one actually thought he'd won the World Championship. Johnny Herbert announced it, and even Max Verstappen was there saying, them lot are effing idiots. They don't know what they're talking about. I'm pretty sure I still need another point. I remember being on the phone to my sports editor saying, has he won it? Do we need to run the package? Like, what's going on here? And I'm like, I don't know. I just need to make some phone calls. And no one actually knew. And it was the most underwhelming World Championship ever. Right. Okay. Let's move on to our favourite subject, as it may turn out. Aston Martin. And a huge congratulations to Fernando Alonso, who has become a father for the first time. And just like the aforementioned Max Verstappen, used it as an excuse to miss Media Day. Any excuse. And as Ben says, he's absolutely within his rights because he wasn't down for the FIA press conference. So who can blame him? He's been around this sport a long time, and we all know the drivers hate Media Day. Journalists don't love it much more, I'll be honest. But anyway, we do them because it's good to talk to them and get their opinion. However, he is returning to a still subpar car. He is actually being replaced for FP1. They're putting their rookie test on. It's just going to be another bad weekend. And we talked, don't we, about the new father bounce. But I somehow don't think Fernando Alonso will be enjoying that this weekend.
Well, I don't know, Beck. I mean, I don't know if there's a new father bounce. There's certainly a new marriage bounce that doesn't exist in your
That's
book.
called love.
Or
That's
does
called
it,
love blubber.
actually?
Is it the bouncing or the love blubber?
I don't know. Well, you had all your opinions about poor old Charles
Really about the timing.
Yeah. Ruled him out of the championship straight away.
Well, what do you think about this timing?
I mean, if only women were so lucky as to be able to choose when they have babies. Sometimes it's not that easy to get pregnant.
Well, this is true, and
I'm sure Fernando Alonso owns a calendar.
Yeah, but it's really hard to have a baby sometimes. Anyway, my point is, it is a thing within sport. Wow. Danny Willett won the Masters absolutely out of nowhere, and he said it was because he'd just become a father, and it's a thing. It's a well-known thing.
Alonso,
but right. I don't think Fernando Alonso is going to win in Japan.
Exactly what I was about to say. Yeah, I don't think the bounce
or the championship.
The vibrations need to be sorted before the yeah. See the vibrations, then we can talk about the bounce. It's a massive weekend for them, though, isn't it? They would have loved to be going into this race. You know, Honda going back into the sport full time with a team like Aston Martin. They would have loved to have gone there, put on a show. As it stands, they will probably hate the fact it's this race. They'd have preferred it later in the season, as it used to be, so that they could at least saved a bit of face, I suppose. We should also mention it's kind of a home race, I guess, in a way for Haas now, given their Toyota partnership. That's going much better for them than the Honda partnership, and Godzilla, of course, now part of that as well. But for Toyota, they will have a lot of people on the ground with Haas, and we touched him in the last pod, didn't we? Ollie Behrman has outscored Lando Norris so far in the championship. They're having a great start to the year. So yeah, I think whereas it's a homecoming that Honda won't be looking forward to, for that TGR Haas team, that as it looks now, they'll be absolutely loving it, won't they?
MMB, you mentioned there about Haas. If you're playing fantasy F1, I don't know if either of you two are. I don't personally, but I think you've got to have Ollie Behrman in your team, haven't you?
Yeah, definitely. I imagine he's not one of the most expensive drivers, but we have praised him quite a lot on here. He's definitely one of the most consistent when it comes to scoring points this season and getting the best out of the car underneath him. You know, we said he finished fifth last time out. For any team that currently isn't a Mercedes or Ferrari, that's essentially winning, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. It's been very impressive. Right, listen, we haven't forgotten, although you may already think Ben's had his 1 minute moan. He has not. It is still to come. Right, are you ready, Ben? Take it away. You've got 60 seconds on the clock.
Okay, so my minute moan this week is one-off liveries. I am all for good liveries, but the ones this week for Japan are atrocious. Please let me know whether I'm right or wrong. We have got a special Godzilla-inspired Haas livery, which looks exactly like every Haas car has done for the last couple of years. We have a Racing Bulls special livery, which looks just like every Racing Bull, who seems to have a new livery launch for every race. Now, I remember when people were doing one-offs. There was the Mercedes special for celebrating 75th year in motorsport. That was when the car was all painted white, and I thought, yeah, that's cool. Interestingly enough, when Toto dug me out, that was that same race. Anyway, that's another point. And I think the Senna livery that McLaren did, with the car as the Brazilian flag as homage to Senna in 2024, that was cool. But some of these efforts are just ridiculous, aren't they? They're just so bad. I just think that there's such a lack of imagination, and that if you are going to do a special livery, make it special. Not just the same colour in the same order and just some little graphic on the side. It just doesn't... It's not a special livery, it's just a logo. It's just ridiculous. Am I wrong?
No, is this like, how we've stopped calling them car launches at the start of the season and we've just started calling them livery launches because no one actually showed off their new car?
Yeah, I mean... But to put a press release out saying, "Oh, we've got a special livery for this race," it's nonsense. It's not special. It's the same as every week.
I liked the McLaren Gulf Oil one in Monaco a couple of years ago, or many years ago now.
I think my favourite for the last few years was actually this race last year for Haas, where they did the cherry blossom Sakura livery, which wasn't tied to. Oh no, Ben doesn't like that. No, okay.
It'd be different, radically different.
It was very different.
Well, cherry blossom in April, March, wherever we are in Japan. I mean, that is one of the things it's famous for. It's quite a good one. I quite liked it as well, MMB.
Yeah. Ben's miserable, isn't he?
Sorry,
he's not very horticultural, is he, Ben?
Exactly, yeah.
Well,
don't you dare call him that. He's gone.
Now that he's got rid of his real grass and put down the fake stuff.
Yeah, coming on Tuesday. Takes 3 days.
Anyone moved in or out of the B Hotel?
No, the B Hotel has been relocated to another area of the garden.
To someone's house.
We were calling it the Airbnb.
The Airbnb. You didn't get that joke first time.
Just because I couldn't believe it was really that. It was so bad. I was like, you can't really be making that joke.
Yeah, it's great. Well,
have you got Sebastian Vettel around now to talk about bees?
No.
Good feature in that.
I've relocated the Bug Hotel, and but the grass is going anyway. Look, no one gives a fuck about my grass, do they?
I'm curious. I've seen your garden. 3 days to lay down new grass. Like you were.
Well, they have to dig out the old grass. They have to dig down, and then they put stone down. Look, honestly, this is really boring. So
these Sunday Times best-selling books are making you too much money. Clearly, right.
Well,
there we go. That was a long old podcast. Hopefully you're all still listening. We will be back, of course we will, with a review of the Japanese Grand Prix. It is normally, we haven't even discussed the racing. It normally actually is a brilliant, brilliant weekend. There is a forecast for a potential for a super typhoon. I was there in 2019 and we had that typhoon. And honestly, I was thinking in a kind of weird way, I'd quite like to see a typhoon. And then I went outside and it was just like a bad day in London. So
it was terrible, wasn't it? It was such an anticlimax.
Yeah, it was.
Do you remember that?
Yeah, it was 2019. It was the Rugby World Cup was on. Yeah.
Yeah. Fuck you, Michael Fish.
Don't go out. It was like stay indoors, and then it was just a bit wet and windy.
Right.
And I remember going to the 7-Eleven to buy all these bloody noodles in what they call.
We were stockpiling food, weren't we?
Noodle things.
Yeah.
Yeah, pot noodles and bananas and like water.
They weren't bananas,
that,
Ben.
We're going to be marooned, but it was just a bit wet and windy.
It was a bit English, British bias. Right, anyway, we will be back on Monday to talk all things Japanese. Get out! Right, now get out. Oh, this is going to take a lot of editing. Right, okay, bye, till Monday.
Sayonara.
See ya.